for Verizon or AT&T because you're getting signals from two different towers, right? It's like the information can be shared, right? If one goes down, if it's burdened, you can click over to the other one. Okay, so then you use this and you build it all across the entire United States until, you know, I'm not an artist, so but you get the idea. So here's the U.S. that they say they have coverage in America, right? And what they want to do is they want to go from a state where they have very, very little coverage, AT&T or Verizon, to a state where they have very, very big coverage. And they're able to identify, because they know the range of the cell towers, they know how far this range is, like to a science, right? They know exactly how much coverage each cell tower is able to provide. They recognize that there are black spots, right? There are black spots in their coverage. No company, neither AT&T nor Verizon, has an image of the United States of America that has complete coverage. They'll say, oh, I have more than you this month, oh, I have more, oh, I have better, blah, 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 blah. So they recognize the black spots. The black spots are actually technically recognized because they recognize the distance, and they have their own mechanisms and processes. I probably shouldn't be disclosing this, but it's sort of like, okay, what's the amount of money we can generate in, you know, southeast Dakota? How much is it going to cost to put up the tower? If the cost of putting up the tower in southeast Dakota is not going to be offset by the amount of revenue that we're able to generate from the population of 200 people that live there. No offense to people from southeast Dakota, I apologize, I shouldn't even be giving this an example. It's just, you know, random rural place. Then they're not going to throw the tower up, right? I'm not trying to make light of where people live, but this is an example. And also, it's the example that's fueled by 12C, with special emphasis on hard-to-reach urban and rural communities. Now, if you understand the Verizon Wireless AT&T metaphor, if you understand that analogy, now you can think of the analogy in the same sense with respect to Homeland Security. We already recognize that JTTF and the fusion centers are sort of, you know, they're located throughout the United States of America, right? What the bureaucrats need to figure out is, based on resources, based on people, we know how many people we have, we know sort of the range that those people can cover, right? So that those people can cover ranges here, right? We want to make sure, especially if you're talking about Homeland Security, that there are absolutely no black spots, right? There cannot be anywhere in the United States of America, in the 48 contiguous or Alaska or Hawaii, there cannot be any black spots, none. So it might be the case that Verizon and AT&T might not offer great service in Southeast Dakota, and I'm sure they got towers up there, but you know, I have an idea of geography that looks like Dakota, and I see like a black spot, right? So if there is a place that there isn't coverage for your cell phone, that's not a problem. If there is a place where there isn't coverage for national security, that's a huge problem. Why? Duh. Terrorist organizations are going to want to establish themselves where they know there isn't coverage, right? Whoa, hey, hold on. There's no radar here. There's no coverage over here. What? There's there's no local law enforcement per se. This is a great place to set up shop, right? The whole point is you need to create an environment where there's no place that now we recognize that this is inevitable. People are going to, both internationally and even homegrown domestic terrorists, are going to find ways around this. But you get the idea. The analogy is, just like the cell metaphor analogy, there needs to be, especially with respect to the communication between these regional centers, if you want to call it that, and the appropriation of people and resources in those centers, there needs to be in every single one of those centers a replication. This is where you do want overlap. A replication of resources, right? We got a guy who can arrest somebody. We got a guy, we got a shrink on board. We got a whatever, you know, we got an MD on board. We got a whatever you might need, you know, we got whatever. CIA, Intel, FBI, blah, blah, blah. Each one of these, like, what's the core group of people that we need? Put those core group of people in that area. Make sure that they got cars and guns and badges and jurisdiction so that if something pops off, they can be there. Right, and we recognize, you know, you calculate, like literally, right? Literally, like how quickly can this person get to, you know, X distance, right? How reasonable is it that this person can travel X miles? You know, blah, 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 blah. So, U.S. government better start talking to the cell phone providers, because, you know, this has nothing to do with cell phones at all. It has nothing to do with, but the analogy is the distance, the idea of coverage and having coverage over the United States and increasing coverage is contingent on the radial sort of proximity that the towers have, right? How far the towers can broadcast that. Well, for Verizon, the CDMA technology, right? How far that CDMA technology can be broadcasted. We recognize that it's stupid to talk about coverage unless you recognize the source of the coverage. If the fusion centers are the source of the coverage, if the JTTFs are the source of the coverage, then we need to make, if that is, and I don't know that it is, you know, the bureaucrats know what it really is, but if it is the fusion centers, then we need to make sure that those fusion centers have 100% coverage of the United States of America, because if they don't have the proper resources, the proper intel, the proper people, and if JTTF doesn't have the proper intel, proper resources, proper people, if they're black spots, obviously people are going to be looking for those black spots in order to set up their organizations. And then what ends up happening is it's like cancer, right? It gets malignant, it spills over, and now you're dealing with a huge problem, right? So there can't be any black spots. And I think the cell phone analogy really, really works, right? So, you know, they should have a map that, and I'm sure they do, right? Have a map where they think in terms of this, right? It's a very sort of easy analogy to make sense of. All right, next is create. So that was number 3. Number 4 is next. Oh, 5 ways I erased it, sorry. And I'm not going to write it again. Number 4. We're still talking about the 5 ways to strengthen interagency coordination. Obviously, you can see the interagency coordination. Maybe I jumped over that too quick. In number 3 was that these regional clearinghouses, if you will, JTTF, fusion centers. There was the other one, the Joint Task Force, blah, blah, blah. I forget what it was called in Los Angeles. Like, there needs to be a lot of those in communication between these regional clearinghouses, my term, so that we have global, not global, but, you know, total coverage of the United States of America. Obviously, that's going to require JTTF coordinating with the Fusion Center, coordinating with whatever that one is called in LA. I forget what Joint Task Force, so I forget what it's called. I have it in my notes, but yeah, so you get the idea. All right, number 4, create an interagency coordination mechanism, right? There needs to be a coordination, C-O-O-R-D-I-N-A, coordination mechanism. All right, so the importance of coordination. I can't spell today. Okay, importance of coordination. Remember when we initially began the discussion on a very, very general level? We've gotten pretty deep at this point, right? But when we began the discussion on a very, very general level, we're talking about soccer coach trying to have a game, blah, blah, blah. He's got to coordinate all the kids and the parents and supplies and blah, blah, blah. Same thing with the other coach. If both of them don't coordinate, they cannot properly play the game. It takes both coaches successfully coordinating many, many different things in order for there to even be the condition of the game. If we look at that analogy and we say, instead of talking about the game, we're going to talk about creating an information or intelligence sharing environment, then we recognize that the coaches are the various agencies and there has to be coordination among the agencies. So the first thing we have to recognize is that there are a large number of agencies. Number of A-G-E-N-C-I. There's a large number of agencies. As we said before, this is sort of recap. These agencies all have different functions. And then we recognize that policy coordination is critical, right? Policy coordination, it's the policy. And we saw this already, and I provided the image that I had before, right? Policy A leads to goal A, leads to the overarching strategic concept. All of this is still within the even larger strategy, right? We're still talking about strategy. So I guess the first part of this series, the first maybe 3 or 3.5 hours, was on intelligence. This next part, the next 3.5 hours, is on now, currently, strategy, right? So the strategy is facilitated by the policy. So if you have a strategy of winning the game, then the various